there's so many people that can play to the standard, that's necessary. But it's a matter of getting on with it's being in a band is not easy.
Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm very excited to be here with you. I'm particularly excited because I've just come off a 90-plus minute interview with the amazing Roger O'Donnell. So in this first of two parts with Roger, we cover off his amazing new solo album, Projections, and I cannot recommend highly enough checking that out. I've linked to it in the show notes. I've had the pleasure, as you hear in the interview, of listening to it a number of times, and I'll be listening to it a lot more. Really, really worth a listen. If you're a lover of brilliant electronic music with lots of emotion, this is a go-to piece of work. But aside from that, we also happen to talk about Roger's near 40-year time with The Cure and also some other bands that you will well and truly recognise but may not have expected he played a role in, and lots more. And then there's even more to come in part two. But I'll let you jump in, have a listen to part one, and I'll talk to you at the start of part two. Roger, it's an absolute pleasure and honour to have you on the show, sir. And how are you this fine autumn sort of middle of the day for you?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's an honour to be asked to come and talk about myself and keyboards. One of my favourite topics.
Absolutely.
It's miserable. Yeah, we just got back from Italy and it was 30 degrees, 32, and there it's about 15, and I'm in Devon and it's raining. So pretty much standard.
It sounds it. Yes, I've had the pleasure of being to Devon once, and I understand you.
Yeah.
So it's as I've said in the introduction to the show, like many of our guests, it's difficult to encapsulate your whole career in an hour or a little bit more, but we're going to try. And I thought we'd start off firstly talking about your last 12 months, how busy you've been leading into you've got an amazing new album coming out. So just tell us over the last year or so what you've been up to.
Yeah, well, it's no secret that during 23 and 24, I was diagnosed with lymphoma. And so exactly 12 months ago today, I just finished treatment. So I was pretty wasted and just looking forward to doing nothing. But then, of course, we got the email from the boss and we launched the album, Songs for a Lost World. So that sort of, I managed to have a bit of rest, but then I spent about a month preparing for those shows, and then the shows were over in about a week. And then I really concentrated on finishing this album, Projections, which is the third electronic album I've done. So I always feel uncomfortable with things in twos. Like, I think it has to be three to be finished, to be complete. So I've been thinking about releasing a third electronic album for a long time. And some of the songs have been around a while, but a lot of them came up after that period of releasing the last Cure album and me recovering from all the treatment I had. So it was very much, I was very cognizant of the fact that I didn't want to do an album that was all about me being ill and like, I'm because that's a bit of a trap to fall into. But actually, while I was ill, while I was going through treatment, I didn't play at all because it was just too emotional for me. And it was so once I was in the clear and feeling better, then I really dived into this record. And also, at the same time, I think last summer, I took delivery of my new Rhodes Mark 8, and that really came to the fore in the record. It was my main instrument for many years back in the day, and I've still got my 1977 suitcase piano over there. It doesn't sound quite as good as it should anymore. Well, that's why I got this one. And it really was like meeting up with an old friend again. And I've always been very wary of most of my electronic albums are purely Moog Voyager. And I've always been very wary of introducing other tones and other instruments into it. But just like that, the Rhodes just sat in there. and it almost took over from the Moog, but not quite. But I was very happy to do that. So then I finished mixing around January, February, and then I thought, let's have a go at this Atmos malarkey. So I went into a studio in London, which shall remain nameless, and spent a day doing Atmos mixes, which was interesting. I'm not sure if I'm convinced, because actually it lends itself very much to electronic instruments, because they don't really exist in the real world. You know, they don't, unless you plug them in, they don't make a sound. So you can kind of put them wherever you want them. Whereas if you're Atmos mixing a piano and 4 cellos, you know, you can't stick one cello up in the air over here and the piano down there. So it lent itself to it, but it still felt quite artificial and a bit like a gimmick. But I was quite happy with the mixes. We had a few problems with them. There was some issues, but we went back after 5 tries. We got it right, and then I went back and mastered for vinyl with a person that I've been working with for 20 years, Guy Davey at Electric Mastering, and that was the real world for me, really. You know, hearing the mixes in stereo, which, you know, even stereo is kind of artificial, really, isn't it? I don't know, we're getting a bit esoteric now, but hearing those masters, it just blew me away. And Guy was like, "Yeah, don't mess about with that Atmos nonsense." But I'm glad I did. So the album will be released on all of the streaming platforms, as all the digital stuff will be one mix, and then the vinyl is going to be a different mix. The mixes are slightly tweaked, and it's also a different master, so it will sound significantly different, different enough for it to be worth buying the vinyl. But if you're that way inclined.
I certainly am, and I will be. And so, Roger, I need to ask you, you've already prompted me on 2 questions I hadn't planned on asking. One I'll save to later. But with the Atmos, when you say you weren't convinced, what sort of challenges did it pose? Is it there is too much freedom with Atmos, and where you can position instruments, that it actually becomes more of a restraint than actually freedom?
It just seems artificial. It's like, okay, well, we'll put that synth over there, and then we'll make it move from the back to the front. Or we'll get this sequence and put it down there, and that'll go up and down. And I'm like, why? Why? It's like there's no good reason. If you're mixing analog instruments in Atmos, so I think you can get a really cool situation where you're actually placed in the middle of the string quartet or the orchestra, and that makes sense. But for electronic music, I mean, I suppose, yeah, it's just another effect, isn't it? But I was determined to try it. I thought it would be interesting. And I do like listening to things in Atmos. But maybe it's just because it's a gimmick. But then did people say that about stereo? You know, I remember wearing a badge at art school that said "Back to Mono," and that was in the mid-70s.
You're absolutely right. No, that's an amazing. No, thank you for that. That's good insight. And so let's move on. The reason I said I plan on buying the vinyl is for very good reason, because you gave me the privilege of listening to the album in the past week, and it is utterly amazing. And I'm not just saying that because you're a guest on the show, but it's right up my alley, and I love it to bits. And I've listened to it sort of 3 or 4 times. And so I thought we'd start firstly with the album projection. Just describe the album in your own words of what you're wanting to achieve with it for a start.
Well, I wanted to go, as I said, I wanted to go back into the electronic domain because I felt that it was unfinished, having released 2 albums. I released one in 2005, which was called The Truth in You, Truth in Me, or something like that. It was a long time ago. And the second one was Songs from the Silver Box. And then I thought, and it needs a third. So I was determined to do a third. I mean, you know, there could be a fourth, but the third was definitely called for. And so some of the songs were from back in the day, and then some of them were very recent. Like I said, after I'd finished treatment and was recovering, and I just wanted it to be like a summation of everything that I've heard and everywhere I've been musically. I just wanted to like take this moment to to step back or step forward to the keyboards and just let it out, which is very much the way I write. I don't sit down and go, I'm going to write a song today. And then, labor over it. I just, if it comes, it comes. And it's usually from a sequence or a pattern or something on the Rhodes now that I've got it sitting next to me. And I just wanted it to feel like a reflection of everything I'd ever done. But rather than calling it reflection, it's projections, which is like where I'm going to go next. So It's about everything I've done and everything about where I'm going to go. And it's not a song about being ill. It's not a song about recovery. It's not an album about recovery. It's it's just I guess the joy of being able to play again, and I'm just thinking about where I've been and everything that I've ever heard, and everything, all of those influences, and it always brings a smile to my face when I hear something that I played, and I know exactly where it's come from. It's not plagiarism. I just know where that influence has come from, and one of the biggest compliments, I sent it to a couple of friends from Toronto, and they said, "Oh yeah, it sounds like you." So
there you go.
I was quite happy about that. And funnily enough, I did a seminar with Philip Glass a few years ago in California, and we were talking endlessly. And before we went on to the stage, he said to me, when I sit down at the piano, and I start playing it, it just sounds like me, and it's so frustrating. And I'm like, Philip, you're crazy. People would give their right arm to sit down and sound like you. And that's what you strive for. I remember I used to think, if I could distill everything that I am and everything that I've heard into one note, that would be fantastic.
Mm.
But I think it's probably 3 notes, 3 or 4. I can't get it into one.
No, and look, I mean, I think you've done a brilliant attempt at distilling it because, the emotion, I'm not surprised about the way you've represented the album, but the emotion on it is really, it's really strong. But as you said, not in a negative or a recovery or a treatment sort of way. It's just this amazing emotion throughout the songs. So I did want to ask you about a few of the songs. And what stood out to me was obviously the title song itself, Projections. The first thing as a keyboard player myself I picked up is that electric piano, that Rhodes sounds wonderful. You've just described why that is the case. So the Mark 8 is obviously, to your ears, an amazing instrument, which I'm not surprised by.
Yeah, it's they've done a great job. They bought the rights to the name, and they started off with I think, quite a small amount of money, and they've managed to turn it around. And I think they've shipped their 500th instrument, and it's not a cheap instrument. I mean, it's up there around 10 grand once you add all the stuff on it. But the basis of it, the harp and the action, is all the same. They've just refined it. The keyboard is manufactured by the people that make Steinway's keyboards. It's really nice. It hasn't got any lateral kind of slop to it, which mine has, because all the cushioning is all worn away. But it sounds great. I mean, I think I need to tweak mine because I need to move the pickup slightly further away from the ends of the tines to give it more of a bell-like resonance. But it's really nice. And I was very dubious about having onboard effects, even though it was Cyril Lance from Moog that did them, and I'm a really old friend of Cyril's. So I was like, oh, it's going to be good if Cyril's done it. And I was like, but yeah, it should be pure. It should be, it shouldn't be going through anything else. It should just be coming out of the preamp. But then when I played it and I hit the delay button, I was like, oh yeah, okay, well this is cool.
Yeah.
Because it's just he's done such a great job on it. And now of course they've midied it, so it's even better. So it can sit in every studio and be the master mother keyboard. So, but it just sounds right, and it's not out of tune, and there's not notes missing, and that's I love old things. I've got a 1923 Steinway
Wow.
grand in the house, and I love it, but it needs continual work. And when I'm in the studio, I just want things I don't have time to mess about. I mean, I've got loads of time, but when I've like got that creative flow, I don't want anything in the way. I just need to be able to play the piano or the synth, and it works. So having a brand new one is quite amazing. And also, I got to know the guys from the company, and I've actually invested. So I'm a part owner in Rhodes, which is very, very, very cool.
Yeah.
So
And I'm sure they're thrilled to have you as well. And so, I mean, a couple of the other songs, Roger, 2+2 is 3. Tell us a little bit behind that one. That's, again, beautiful song. I love it's very rhythmic, and it's sort of got this beautiful mix of contemporary sounds, and including, the piano's sort of a retro feel as well. Tell us a little bit about that one.
yeah, that's the oldest song on the record, and that sort of harks back to probably the end of the last electronic record that I released, which was in 2010 maybe. So that's quite an old song, and that sort of uses a lot of the ways of creating that I used on those albums, building up patterns one note at a time with the Voyager, and then I send it to my friend Brian in Philadelphia, whose band's name Alka, and he does all the percussion, which is amazing, because I don't have the patience for that. Like I was saying, I don't have time in the studio. I just don't have the patience to like move little beats around and then bring in samples. And so I send him a song with a sort of a guide rhythm on it, and then he sends me back like 10 to 20 tracks of rhythm, beats and things. And he always says, just use what you want. You don't have to use it all. And I always use it all. And on that particular song, he sent back some melodic ideas as well, which I used, which was really nice. But that one is really, like I said, it's the oldest song on the record, and it's really the bridge between this record and the last record, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did want to say there's such continuity between those two records. I won't claim to have listened to Songs from the Silver Box when it came out, but I listened to it subsequent to Projections, and I went, "Wow, I can totally see the continuity. It's amazing." My favourite track, Roger, is "I Can Only See You in a Mirror." It's an absolutely stunning song. Just tell us a little bit. Again, the story behind the emotion of this track. To me, that was one of the ones where the emotion really came through strongly.
Yeah, well, that I Can Only See You in a Mirror. The title comes from my long-time hairdresser, Keith, who died last year. Because I only ever saw him in the mirror. I'd be sitting there and he'd be crying. And we used to have endless conversations about music and fashion and style and everything. And he was just a staple in my life. I never thought he wouldn't be there. It's like I compared him to like Levi jeans or, whatever. I can't think of anything else. And so that song really is about him and about the emotion that I feel. Every time I drive into London, I miss him. I feel that his presence isn't there. And he was a big fan of. He would go every year to Trinidad to the steel drum festivals, carnival, and so there's some elements of that in there, not consciously, but when I listen back to it, I was like, oh yeah, that's what that is. So and that hasn't got any rhythm on it, no beats on that song, because I think it just stood up for itself. That's a combination of probably every synth I've got in my studio. The Moog One over there, and I've got a Prophet, a sequential 6, which and that's got some nice little samples and nice little sequences in it. And so I used a combination of everything on that song. No Rhodes on that track.
No, that's right. Absolutely amazing. And I do want to link back. You mentioned that that's the third of your, in quotation marks, synth albums. And then you've got this other side of you, this amazing output that is more in the piano orchestrally driven domain. So I did want to ask you about 2022's 7 Different Words for Love.
Yeah.
That's obviously a very different approach to recording, but just tell us, looking back now, sort of 3 years after the fact, what that meant to you and how you approached that album. It's obviously a whole different ballgame.
that album was driven entirely by one instrument. So I was about to have my Steinway restored, and the piano restorer came around, and he started to tell me about this instrument called an una corda, which is basically a piano, um, but you can put damping. I mean, you can put damping on any piano, but this is specifically made so that you can layer fabric against the strings, and it makes it very percussive. So I downloaded the sample, and I just started playing, and it just made me play these like virtually sequences on the instrument, and that just led. And I wrote all. I think there are 7 songs and 1 extra. Yeah, 7 different words for love. There you go. So there are 8 songs. I wrote them all in about 2 weeks. So,
Wow.
and then I spoke to Paul Corkett, who's worked with The Cure for 25 years. I said, do you think I need to buy an una corda and replay all the parts, or do you think the samples are okay? And he was like, samples sound great. So I kept it like that. And then we went into the studio in Bath and recorded, my friend Miriam recorded the cello parts. And then Paul actually mixed that record. So, it was just a very delicate record, and it was just very delicate little songs and little melodies, and they just sort of came out of me. Actually, the final one last word during the beginning of that record, when I had a few songs, I sent them to my friend Orion, who's a producer, and he was working on a movie in America with a first-time director, who's now a very good friend of mine, Darren Legallo. And he played in one of the songs, and Darren was like, okay, we need him to do the soundtrack. So I want this music on the soundtrack. And so I thought, so Orion said, you up for it? And I said, yeah, I mean, it's done. The record's done. It's easy. I can just place the songs on the record. Little did I know, 6 months later, that I would be writing 25 actual discrete cues for it. And I think I used a couple of songs from the album, but most of the songs on the album were too emotional for the film. You know, it was like, I can't use this. It overpowers the scene. I'm like, oh, okay then. And it was like, it was hard work. It really was. But I mean, in the end, it was really worth it. I'm very happy that I did it. So I ended up with a whole album of my own stuff, and then there's 25 other cues that were written specifically for the record, for the movie. And Darren asked me to write something specific, and that's where that song came out of. And I was like, wow, if you hadn't asked me or hadn't pushed me, that song would never have existed. So yeah, it was a really nice collaboration. And in the end, you know, so I'd score the whole film, send it to him, and we'd do a FaceTime, and he'd be like, yeah, I'm not really loving this one. Maybe more soundscape. And I'm like, what the fuck does soundscape mean? And so we went backwards and forwards. In the end, we were getting there. And then finally he came over and came and sat on the producer's couch, and we did it all. We just knocked it out, and it was all, and then we got to the end of the movie, and he's like, oh shit, this song hasn't got a cue. It needs a cue. And I'm like, oh my God. So he's going to sit there while I try and write something from a blank page. And Mimi, my partner, had been with me throughout the process, like as a muse, like as a touchstone for everything. And I looked at her, she looked at me, and we were like, this is not going to happen, you know. But luckily we found something that I'd already written that worked. So I don't know if you've ever been in that position where somebody's waiting for you to write a piece of music and just standing over you. It's different in the studio, you know, when I have to play a solo or I have to come up with a part with Robert, because we've been working together for so long that, you know, it's very natural. But with a complete stranger, but we've scheduled the next movie. I'm going to score his next movie, and so it's going to be a much more organic approach though this time, and I'm going to have written pieces, and we'll play them on set. So it'll be I'll be more involved from the beginning. So I'm quite looking forward to that.
And you've just answered my question was, did the whole thing turn you off soundtrack composition? But it sounds like it hasn't, so that's a great outcome.
Well, the jury's out on that because it was every time, after every FaceTime we do, I'd say to Mimi, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell him I quit. But I didn't, and I'm very glad that I did. And the film's called Sam and Kate, and it stars Dustin Hoffman and Sissy Spacek. So it was a pretty, it was a good film to, start work on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be linking to that for sure. And you've also led me down another path I wasn't intending at this stage, but let's do it. So you mentioned Philip Glass. You've obviously had a relationship there before that I was aware of. Just tell us a little bit about what you've gained from working with Philip in the different ways that you have over the years.
I only met him once for a few days, but
Right.
just I never actually worked with him. I did write a piece of music, and we were going to perform at his yearly Tibet fundraiser, but that didn't happen for some reason. But just being in his presence, I mean, it's just I mean, for me, in that kind of that Steve Reich, that whole world, I love that. My orchestral music doesn't really fall into that area. It's not as minimal. I think I'm way more melodic than those guys are. But just talking to him and hearing him, and so he said to us, "So how do you guys write then? How do you score?" I'm like, I use Logic, and then I give it to an arranger just to make sure everything's in the right place, and then I spit it out. He said, "Well, I still use a pencil and manuscript paper." And he said, "I'll tell you why that's better, because at the end of it, I sign every page and I sell them." He said, "You can't sell a digital file." I guess this was before, what were those things that everybody went bankrupt with?
Oh, the
Those-
NFTs. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Which I never completely understood. In fact, I don't understand them at all. But nobody else did, because they've all gone, haven't they? They've all disappeared, and everybody lost all their money.
That's
So
right.
yeah, it was a great. I mean, I didn't hesitate when my friend Bradley, who was VP at Google at the time, said, "Do you want to fly out to San Francisco and do a seminar with Philip Glass?" I'm like, "I'm there,"
Yeah.
because he's a hero, and it's great to be able to meet those people. And I always kind of bear that in mind when somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, Roger, it's such an honor to meet you. You've been a huge influence on my life, on my playing, on my life, on my playing." And rather than, say, "Oh, don't be stupid. I haven't influenced anyone." I always remember how I feel around my heroes, and you just have to be, just be thankful. And it's nice that if you can give somebody something to take away and affect their playing, it's a great thing.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And so, let's talk about your heroes and actually go back a decade or five to your musical upbringing, Roger. So just tell us in a little bit as far as your musical upbringing as a child, what got you into music in the first place in those early years?
Yeah, well, as I always like to say, I was born next to the piano and have never moved very far away from one. I was born next to the piano at home in the living room, and from the moment I could walk, I was playing it or hitting it, and my mum would play, and I'd sit underneath it and push the keys up. And then I started going to see bands, and my brother taught me to play 12-bar blues, and then I would buy sheet music. I had some piano lessons, but I didn't really get on with that because I could play by ear, and I was like, "Well, this doesn't make sense to me. This is just like painful torture." I wish I'd stuck with it, but because to be able to play by ear and by music is amazing. But I've got by on what I've got, and so then I started hanging around with bands, predominantly kind of blues rock bands in those days, in the early '70s. And at the time, the only way you could play with a band was electric piano or an organ. I hated the organ at the time. I love it now, but so I got an electric piano. I said to my dad, I want to buy an electric piano. And he said, well, if you get a job and make half the money, I'll give you the other half, which was, I've never forgotten that lesson.
Yeah.
And I think the piano only cost about 40 quid. So, but I don't remember how much I was getting paid. Obviously, it wasn't very much. So I bought a Hohner pianette, which had these little sticky pads on the end of each key that plucked a tine. And I didn't have an amplifier. That was a big hole in my plan, my master plan. But I discovered that I could plug into the back of my mum and dad's clock radio. And that worked as an amplifier.
I love it.
Then finally, I got rid of that and I got the Rhodes because I started. I went to art school, which was a basic route for any musician, rock musician in those days, and then left to join a band. And then, we were on the cabaret circuit, playing in working men's clubs. And then I quit because all my friends had cars, houses, jobs, I had money. I had nothing. I could just about make a living from doing this cabaret work. So I thought, okay, I'll stop. I'll get a job and I'll buy a synthesizer and then I might be able to get a better gig. So my friend at the time, who I'd been playing with for years at that stage, Boris Williams, the drummer, he was doing this motorcycle messenger in London. So I did that for a couple of years until I got knocked off by a cab. And I managed to buy a synth just in time to... Boris was playing with the Thompson Twins by that stage. And he said one of the keyboard players was leaving. Did I want to join? So that was it. I just bought this Prophet 600, which is over there. And so it all fell into place. And then from the Thompson Twins, I quit them to move to Los Angeles to try and do film music, which didn't work. It was a complete disaster. And then I joined the Psychedelic Furs. And then Boris, by that time, was in The Cure. And he said, do you want to come on tour with The Cure? And I was like, yes. So actually, I didn't immediately say yes because it was only for a 5-week tour. And I had, I was pretty secure in the Furs and they wanted me to play on their next record. So they sent me the cassette of Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. And I put it in the cassette player. First 30 seconds, I was like, I have to be in this band.
Yeah.
No, and that was it. And that was 1987. I quit once, so I was fired once, and I'm back. I don't know what's going to happen next.
One never knows, and we're going to get onto that, Roger. And just before we do jump into The Cure, which is obviously a huge part of your story, I'm just fascinated by working men's clubs, which in Australia we've got similar, but for our US and Canadian listeners and so on, I'm trying to think of an equivalent. It's probably where there'd be union clubs, stuff like that in some cities. The cabaret stuff, Roger, Thompson Twins and Psychedelic Furs, you couldn't get three more different genres, let alone The Cure being another whole plane on its own. I'm assuming that cabaret stuff and the working man's clubs really got you into that mode of being diverse in approaching any piece of music with what it needs.
Yeah, and that has paid huge dividends for me. I can basically play in any genre and whatever I'm presented with, and also because of my ear, because I can play in any style. So I was able to get, to get along musically. And also I'm the youngest child in the family. So I'm able to, it was always my job to make people laugh. So I can always get on with people in bands as well, which is 90% of it, I mean, there's so many people that can play to the standard, that's necessary. But it's a matter of getting on with being in a band is not easy. You spend hours and hours together, or more so back in the day. Not so much. We don't do that anymore. But the cabaret circuit was. So we were the rhythm section. It was guitar, keyboards, bass, and drums for an American soul trio called the Flirtations. And we would play their hits and all the soul classics, Heard It Through the Grapevine, Isn't She Lovely, all these kind of songs. I think we were probably only on stage for about an hour
Yeah.
max. And it would be about 11 o'clock at night. We'd go on stage, 10 or 11. And and if any of us played a wrong note, we'd get out the back door as fast as we could, because the girls, if they got hold of us, they're like, right, we're having a band call tomorrow. You got to practice. So we'd scarp, and then we'd spend all day in these like northern cities like Stockton or Middlesbrough or Birmingham, and like you'd get kicked out of the bed and breakfast at about 11 o'clock in the morning, and it was it wasn't a lot of fun. And I think if we did a week, which was 6 shows, we got paid £85 a week, and out of
Wow.
that we had to pay for our own accommodation. So I used to take home about 50 quid a week.
Wow.
But at the same time, the rhythm section, the guys, we had like a jazz fusion band. So we'd sometimes sneak into the venues and rehearse, but they didn't like it. I remember being told, you lot can't be in here playing that rubbish. We don't like music here.
I can
So but
imagine.
it was, I could play, yeah, and I still can. I mean, obviously I've been playing the Cure's music for the last nearly nearly 40 years.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
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 So
No.
I think it always amazes Robert when he's like, I remember we were he was doing a cover of a Bowie song for some compilation. And he's like, Roger, what is this saxophone phrase? And I listened to it once and I played it. He's like, how did you do
Yeah.
that? I'm like, it's just, it's my ear, my parents both played the piano, and I've come from a very musical and creative family. And you grow up working out how a song is put together by listening to it. And it stays with you, you don't lose that ability.
Absolutely. Is it fair to say, Roger, I mean, you mentioned that you had the Rhodes after the Pianet and so on. Obviously, joining the Thompson Twins and then Psychedelic Furs, both quite keyboard-driven
Yeah.
bands. Is that where you really got immersed? And as you said, you bought a synth yourself. That's where you really got into that side of things?
Yeah, the Rhodes got put away. I mean, the Rhodes really was retired in probably 1982, because the 80s, I mean, it was synth pop. And with the Thompson Twins, I was playing the Prophet 600 and a Prophet T8. The T8 cost me an entire tour's income to
Yeah.
pay for it. Then I joined the Furs, and at the time, I think I hold the record for the most different models of sequential circuits instruments on stage at the same time. I had virtually everything, and yeah, it was, and then because I took all that with me to the Cure, but the Cure wasn't really about synth sounds. It was really
No.
all about samples. By the time I got there in 1987, the Kiss Me album was heavily influenced, loads of samples on it, like heavy string sounds and all of those kind of Japanesey kind of koto, shakuhachi flute. And then when we went in to make Disintegration, I became the sole keyboard player in the band. Finally there was a keyboard player and nobody else had to worry about it. So I got to generate all those sounds. So I pretty much created the whole soundscape. There's that word again, soundscape, for that album. And I'm very proud of the sound of that record. I mean, we had, E2 was probably the main emulator. E2 was probably the main sample, and we had a CD-ROM called Universe of Sounds,
Oh, yeah.
and you can still find a lot of the samples are on that. And we had Mirage. I had the Prophet 2000, which the main string samples come from. I didn't use any. I mean, I had a Mini Moog in the studio, but we only used it for sound effects. So there were no what I'd call synth sounds on that record. It's all samples.
Yeah. And so let's jump into The Cure then. And so obviously, as you mentioned, you were initially sort of a touring member. You received the cassette for Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, which is just an amazing album. So what was the initial learning curve? Having come off the Psychedelic Furs and Thompson Twins, it can't have been an absolute shock needing to learn that stuff, but were there adjustments you need to make on playing with The Cure?
Yeah, play less. That was the biggest adjustment. Also for Boris, the drummer, because we came from this kind of, I mean, although we played it in our spare time, jazz fusion and funk, jazz funk world. We came from that world, and where the more notes you can play, the better, the more you get paid. And getting into The Cure, I mean, Boris wasn't allowed to use a hi-hat for a couple of albums, and for me, it was about saying the most with the least amount of notes. And there was this post-punk ethic of not displaying any virtuosity in your playing. And that, I mean, I think to some degree, it still exists within the culture of The Cure. The other thing, the other side to that coin is, though, if you screw up, you can't say, "Oh, it's post-punk." You have to play the little that you are playing well. It's not acceptable anymore to not be able to play like it maybe was in the early days. But the band is very highly accomplished musicians now. We know pretty much the entire catalogue, which always blows Robert away for some reason. You say, "Oh, what do you think about playing blah blah blah?" And Simon and I will just start playing it, and he's like, "How do you know that?"
Wow.
But it's just I think we've got a repertoire of about 120 songs. I mean, they need dusting off, but there's a core of about 30 that we can play standing on our heads. But the other 90 need a bit of a dust off, but they're good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, in those earlier days with The Cure, you mentioned yourself that a lot of the success of bands tends to be about the mix of personalities. Obviously, The Cure has a reputation of being a heady concoction of personalities, but you're one of the longest serving members. I mean, what made you so valuable to the team that they kept you on initially as a touring member to go, this is obviously working?
I think Robert enjoyed the fact that I could play exactly what was asked of me. I think I'd like to say my personality and my rapier wit and character, but I think, and every time I've come back, it's been like, "Oh, he'd be like, oh, good, we can play those songs again." It's about I can play what he wants, how he wants it played. I know what he wants. When he sends me a new song that he's working on, I know where it's going to go. I know what the keyboard parts are going to do before I've even heard them. And it's not a matter of him being predictable. It's that I know him. I know I've worked with him for nearly 40 years, and I know what he likes, and I know what to give him. And I think that is the biggest thing, my biggest attraction. Like I said, my joke's pretty good as well. And I do make everyone laugh. And I think there's a need for that. There's a tension breaking situation because there are times when we don't particularly get on with each other, or we've been on tour for 16 weeks, and everyone's getting tired, but we generally have a really good time. It's fun. And the last time I came back to The Cure, I remember Robert and I said, "Look, if we can't get on now, we never will." So, and it's been pretty good. I think I'm always a thorn in his side, though, because I don't let him get away with stuff. I'll always bring stuff to his attention, and I think he finds me quite annoying.
But I mean, as you know, Roger, that's the sign of a great outfit too. You don't want to surround yourself with a bunch of yes people. I think that's a credit to Robert. You surround yourself with yes people, you end up with bland output. So I think that's probably part of the secret of it.
Yeah.
And so if you don't mind, I'm actually thinking for something different. We're going to work backwards because covering off some of these albums you've been involved with, obviously could be a whole episode on their own, but Songs of a Lost World, just unbelievable. I know I was super excited when it was released and, even before I heard the first song. Just tell us about the approach and how it's sort of a summation of all those years of working together and obviously as a keyboard player, what you had to put into that, because it is obviously a huge component of it.
Yeah, I said to Robert a few years ago, I said, we need to make one last record, and it needs to be the saddest, darkest, blackest record we could ever possibly make. And he didn't disagree. And unlike the albums since The Head on the Door, Robert wrote all of these songs himself, and they're quite personal to him. And he actually played a lot of the keyboards on them. I mean, he's not what I'd call a keyboard player, but he knows what he wants. And with the help of MIDI and autocorrect and all that kind of stuff, he can get by. And even when I would ask it, he'd send me a part and I'd say, oh, just let me play that how I'd play it. And he'd be like, no. So I would play it again, but I would play it as he played it, So there wasn't a lot of room for creative input into that record, because I think it was a very, very personal record for him. And I appreciate that and I respect it. There's no reason why he has to put our songs on a record. And I was blown away by the success of it and very happy for him that he could come back after, 18 years and do that and get so much respect and love. So yeah, not probably the least involvement in any record that I've had. So that sets it to one side for me.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely. Did you have to do much preparation as far as touring, Roger, as far as how you manage those songs on tour?
we toured, while we toured in 22, 23, we did about 5 of them, I think, or maybe 4 or 5. So I already knew those. And then when he hit us with the rest of the album, about a month before we did the show in London, the premiere, and I just worked them out. He sends MIDI files, or I didn't actually hear the album until it was released, so that's always interesting.
Yeah.
I think we took it to another level when we played it live, though. I think it was. I think we gave it a lot more feeling and a lot more force and strength. It's always fun working out songs when, but like I said, it's not that difficult for me, having
Yeah.
known for so long.